Canada, a land known for peace, calm, and untouched wilderness. But behind that beauty hides something darker. Tonight, we explore the 7 most disturbing true Canadian horror stories. Encounters buried within endless forests, frozen lakes, abandoned mining camps, and lonely highways, where silence feels alive and shadows seem to watch from the dark. Every story you're about to hear comes from verified reports, witness testimonies, local accounts, and documented incidents. These aren't myths. They aren't legends. These are real encounters of the unknown. With each story, the dread will grow. The wilderness will feel closer, and the fear of these remote places will begin to breathe around you. Prepare yourself. The land you think is peaceful and quiet hides dangers that are anything but ordinary. If you enjoy real, chilling stories like these, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss a story from the world's darkest corners. There's a stretch of highway in Alberta that most people avoid after dark. It's long, empty, and surrounded by forests so dense they swallow the moonlight. Travelers call it the road that eats people, and the name isn't just a rumor. For decades, cars and trucks have disappeared along this lonely route. Vehicles are often found abandoned, with doors wide open, engines still running. But the drivers, gone without a trace. No signs of struggle, no footprints leading into the forest. Just emptiness. Locals say the highway has a presence, an unseen force that watches from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to make someone vanish. Stories passed down by truckers, travelers, and even police officers all mention the same strange feeling. A sudden heaviness in the air, a sense that something unseen is moving alongside your vehicle, keeping pace no matter how fast you drive. Tonight, we'll explore the first of many disappearances along this highway, hear eyewitness accounts, and uncover the strange patterns that have left experts baffled. But beware. Once you hear the stories, you may never look at a quiet back road the same way again. The earliest documented disappearance on this highway happened in the early 1970s. A seasoned trucker, known for never missing a delivery, set out one cold, clear night. Hours later, his truck was found parked neatly on the shoulder of the road. The engine was still warm, the headlights were on, and yet, the driver was nowhere to be found. Search teams combed the surrounding forest for miles. They found no footprints, no tire marks leading off the road, nothing that could explain how a man simply vanished into thin air. Even his personal belongings, wallet, phone, coat, were gone, as if they had disappeared along with him. Locals who knew the trucker swore he would never leave the road voluntarily, especially at night. And police reports from the time described in eerie detail. Several drivers passing the same highway that night reported seeing a shadowy figure moving alongside the truck, pacing it as if it was waiting. This case set the pattern for all the disappearances that would follow. A vehicle intact, an engine running, a person gone. No signs of struggle, no explanation, only the road, and the silence that swallows anyone who dares travel it alone. And this was just the beginning. As the years went by, another chilling pattern emerged along the haunted highway. The sightings of a woman dressed entirely in white. Locals began calling her the Phantom Hitchhiker. She appeared out of nowhere, usually on foggy nights, standing alone at the side of the road. Drivers who stopped to offer help reported the same unnerving experience. She would silently climb into the vehicle, sitting quietly, never speaking a word. And then, after only a few minutes, she would vanish. Sometimes leaving the passengers shaken, sometimes leaving the car eerily cold, as if her presence had sucked the warmth from the air. The terrifying part? Real victims often saw her just minutes before disappearing themselves. People who stopped for her or drove past her would vanish without a trace. leaving their vehicles abandoned. Witnesses described the feeling of being watched, of an invisible hand guiding them off the road or pulling them into the shadows of the surrounding forest. Even those who survived encounters claim the woman never blinked, never moved naturally. Her movements were just wrong, like she didn't belong in this world. The stories grew so frequent that locals refused to drive alone at night. The white figure became a warning. See her, and you might not live to tell the tale. And the highway? It kept claiming more victims, silently, patiently, as it had for decades. As the disappearances continued, the RCMP stepped in to investigate. Reports were filed, search parties were organized, and every lead was followed. Yet nothing ever explained the vanishings. Vehicles were found intact, belongings left behind, and yet the people themselves were gone, as if swallowed by the night. Investigators noted a disturbing pattern. Most cases happened on cold, clear nights. Most victims were alone, driving late along the same stretch of highway. And in several instances, witnesses described seeing strange shadows moving alongside vehicles, sometimes just a flicker at the corner of the eye, other times a full figure pacing the road. Despite hours of interviews, physical searches, and even night patrols, the cases went cold. The more the police investigated, the more they realized that the highway seemed to operate by its own rules. No matter how many officers drove the route, no one could predict when or where the next disappearance would occur. Frustration grew among authorities, and locals noticed a chilling reality. The highway didn't just claim lives randomly. It followed a pattern, one the police could never understand, and one that left families haunted by the unanswered question: what happened to their loved ones? Even decades later, the highway continues to swallow travelers, and the RCMP reports remain open, unfinished. A silent testimony to the road's unrelenting hunger. Not everyone who traveled the highway at night vanished. One man, an experienced long-haul trucker, survived an encounter that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He recalls driving through a dense stretch of forest, headlights cutting through the darkness, when he first felt it. A presence, heavy and unshakable, moving just beyond the edges of his vision. At first, he thought it was a trick of the trees or fatigue setting in. But then he saw it. A dark, shadowy figure pacing alongside his truck, matching his speed exactly. It followed the truck. He whispered to investigators later, his hands still trembling as he spoke. No matter how fast I drove, it stayed there, just watching. I could feel its eyes on me, and every instinct told me I wouldn't make it if I stopped. He sped through the night, gripping the wheel until dawn, the figure finally disappearing as daylight broke. He survived, but the memory never left him. Nights are now unbearable, he says, and even decades later, he refuses to drive that highway after sunset. His testimony confirmed what many had long feared. This wasn't random. Something unseen stalks the highway, waiting patiently for the next traveler to enter its path. And for those who disappear, no one knows where or what it takes them. Even today, the highway remains infamous. Locals warn anyone traveling through Alberta: avoid it at night and never stop for strangers, no matter how desperate they may seem. The road has a reputation that keeps most people away, and even regular commuters take longer, safer routes just to bypass it. Strange accidents still occur along the stretch, cars found abandoned, drivers gone, and sometimes skid marks that lead nowhere. Travelers report feeling sudden chills, hearing footsteps along the roadside when no one is there, and glimpsing shadowy figures in the corner of their vision. Some claim their radios cut out or flicker with static, at the exact moment they sense something watching them. Authorities have tried to improve safety with more signage, patrols, and emergency call boxes. But it hasn't stopped the disappearances. The pattern remains the same as it was decades ago. The road is quiet, the night is cold, and something waits for those who dare to travel alone. For many, the highway is no longer just a road. It's a warning, a place where the night itself seems alive, hungry, and patient. And those who have seen what lurks alongside it know one simple truth: some roads are better left untraveled after dark. Headlights cut through the darkness, the wind howls through the trees, and the silence presses in from every side. You feel eyes on you, though you know you are alone. Every shadow seems to move with purpose, every rustle of the forest a warning. The haunted highway doesn't announce its victims. It waits, patient, invisible, relentless. Trucks vanish. Cars stop, doors left wide open. Travelers disappear, leaving nothing behind but the echo of their last moments. And no matter how much police investigate, no one can explain why it happens or what waits just beyond the edge of the road. So, next time you find yourself on a lonely stretch of highway, remember the stories of those who never returned. Remember the phantom hitchhiker. Remember the shadow that follows the truck. And remember, some roads are not meant to be traveled alone after dark. Because out there, in the cold Alberta night, the road is still hungry, and it's still waiting. Far to the north, in the frozen forests of Quebec, Indigenous elders have passed down warnings for generations. They speak of a creature that lurks in the deep snow, tall, gaunt, with glowing eyes, and a hunger that can never be satisfied. They call it the Wendigo. According to legend, the Wendigo becomes stronger in winter. When the forests are silent, the snow is deep, and travelers are isolated. It is not just a monster. It is a force, a presence that preys on fear, loneliness, and desperation. Those who encounter it rarely return, and those who do are forever changed. The elders' stories are not meant to scare for entertainment. They are warnings. They describe how the Wendigo can mimic voices, move faster than any human, and disappear into the snow without leaving a trace. They tell of hunters and travelers who ignored the signs, only to vanish without a sound, leaving only footprints that lead nowhere. Tonight, we follow one such story, of a man who entered the frozen forest, ignoring the warnings, and came face to face with a creature that was as ancient as the wilderness itself. A creature that was waiting, patient and hungry, for its next victim. In the dead of winter, a seasoned hunter decided to venture deep into the forests of northern Quebec. He was alone, carrying only his rifle, supplies, and the confidence that came from years of experience in the wilderness. The snow had just fallen, covering the ground in a thick, silent blanket, and the forest seemed peaceful, almost too peaceful. As he moved further from the trail, the silence became heavier. The only sounds were the crunch of his boots in the fresh snow and the occasional distant call of a raven. But soon, he noticed something strange. The tracks in the snow didn't match anything he had ever seen. They were human-like, yet far larger, and they stretched in impossible patterns, disappearing and reappearing as if the forest itself had shifted. Despite his instincts telling him to turn back, the hunter pressed on, drawn by the lure of game, or perhaps by curiosity. But the deeper he went, the colder the air became, and the more he felt that he was not alone. Something was watching him, moving silently through the trees, keeping pace without making a sound. This was the beginning of a night that would change his life forever. A night where the stories of the Wendigo would no longer feel like legends, but a terrifying reality waiting just beyond the snow-covered trees. As the hunter pressed deeper into the forest, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The snow around him was marked with footprints, large, human-like, and impossibly long. They stretched for miles in every direction, yet they never led to a destination, never ended, and never showed signs of anyone returning. The tracks were too wide for any human, yet unmistakably humanoid in shape. Some impressions were deep, as if the creature weighed far more than any man could. Others were almost ghostly, barely pressing into the snow at all, vanishing and reappearing farther along, as if the forest itself was shifting them. The hunter tried to follow them, hoping to find an animal or some explanation. But the tracks seemed to taunt him, twisting and weaving through the trees in ways that made no sense. With each step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Shadows moved just beyond the trees, and the wind carried whispers. Or was it his imagination? Soft voices calling his name. By then, he understood that these were not ordinary tracks. Something unnatural had passed this way, something patient and relentless. And for the first time, the hunter realized he was no longer alone. Something far older, far hungrier, was moving through the snow, following him silently, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As darkness fell, the forest seemed to come alive in the most terrifying way. The wind picked up, rattling the trees, but the sound wasn't natural. It carried a low, guttural echo, almost like screams bouncing off the frozen trunks. The hunter's heart pounded as he realized the forest was no longer silent. Something was moving, unseen, shifting between the trees with a speed that no human could match. He reached for his radio, hoping to call for help, but the signal crackled and warped. Then, in a voice trembling with fear, he whispered into the device, "It's watching me." His words hung in the air, swallowed by the darkness. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shuddered. The trees around him shook violently, branches snapping as if a massive force moved unseen through the forest. He could hear footsteps circling him, crunching in the snow. But when he spun around, there was nothing. Just shadows stretching in impossible shapes, moving against the dim light of his flashlight. Panic set in. The hunter ran, each step heavy in the snow, every breath visible in the freezing air. Yet, no matter how far he went, the feeling of being followed never left. The forest had become alive, and the predator, the Wendigo, was patient, silent, and unrelenting. That night, the hunter learned the truth that the elders had warned about for generations. Some creatures in the northern wilderness do not hunt for food. They hunt for fear itself. Through the thick darkness, the hunter finally saw it. At first, he thought it was a trick of the moonlight on the snow. But then the shape stepped into a small clearing, and his blood ran cold. The creature was impossibly tall and skeletal, its limbs long and twisted like branches stripped bare by winter. Its eyes glowed a faint, unnatural yellow, cutting through the darkness as if they could see straight into his soul. Every movement was unnatural, jerky, and inhuman, as though it defied the laws of nature itself. It moved silently between the trees, gliding rather than walking, its shadow stretching and twisting across the snow. The hunter could feel the weight of its gaze pressing down on him, a crushing presence that made it impossible to think or breathe properly. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The Wendigo stopped, lifted its head, and stared directly at him. There was intelligence there, malice, hunger, and a cold patience that made him realize this creature wasn't acting on instinct alone. It was deliberate. It was hunting. The hunter ran, knowing that every second he hesitated could be his last. And as he disappeared into the shadows of the forest, the Wendigo remained, tall and unmoving, a guardian of the frozen woods, and a reminder of the terror that waits for those who ignore the Elder's warnings. The next morning, a search team set out to find the hunter, only to discover that he was not the only one to have encountered something in those woods. Torn clothing lay scattered across the snow, some pieces ripped from branches as if flung violently aside. Dark stains, like dried blood, marred the pristine white landscape. Claw marks, deep, jagged, and unlike any known animal, were etched into the tree trunks and snow-covered ground. They stretched for yards, crisscrossing the forest in erratic patterns that made no sense. The searchers could feel the weight of the forest watching them, and an uneasy silence pressed in with every step. The hunter himself was found days later, exhausted and frostbitten, eyes wide with the terror of what he had witnessed. He spoke little, but the marks on the trees and blood in the snow told a story no one wanted to imagine. The team left the forest shaken. Even armed and prepared, they could not explain what had left such evidence, or why the tracks ended abruptly, as if the creature had simply vanished into thin air. The legends were true. The Wendigo roamed those northern forests, patient, silent, and ever hungry, leaving behind only the fragments of its victims for the living to find. Even decades later, the forest in northern Quebec is avoided by locals, especially during the long, harsh winters. Hunters and hikers steer clear of the trails where snow blankets the ground and the trees loom like silent sentinels. The stories of disappearances and terrifying encounters are not forgotten. They are warnings carved into the memory of everyone who lives nearby. Sightings continue to this day. Shadows moving between the trees, strange glowing eyes peering from the darkness, and footprints that appear and vanish without explanation. Those who have experienced it firsthand describe the same chilling sensation, being watched, hunted, and tested by something far older than any human presence. The Wendigo, once only a legend spoken of in hushed tones by elders, has become real for anyone who dares enter the frozen forest alone. Its hunger is patient, its movements silent, and its existence a grim reminder that some forces in the world are not meant to be challenged or even seen. For those who hear this story, remember, the wilderness may look peaceful, but in the cold silence of the northern forests, something waits. Something that will not rest and will not forgive. In the heart of Vancouver, a modern apartment complex became the center of a mystery that would leave residents terrified. Multiple tenants reported seeing a figure late at night, a tall, dark shadow that moved silently through the hallways. No one could describe it clearly. It seemed featureless, yet impossibly human in shape. Those who saw it say it appeared without warning. Doors would creak open, lights flicker, and then there it would be, gliding silently along the walls, just out of reach, always watching. Some residents claimed it would pause outside their doors, unmoving, as if studying them before vanishing into the darkness. Security reports confirmed unusual activity. Motion sensors triggered with no explanation, alarms going off in empty hallways, and surveillance cameras capturing only fleeting, distorted shapes. Tenants began whispering among themselves, sharing stories of late-night encounters that were too similar to be coincidences. The building, once a normal urban dwelling, became a place of fear. People avoided hallways at night, slept with doors locked, and reported feeling an oppressive presence pressing down on them. This was only the beginning of the Shadow Man's reign over the complex, a reign that would escalate in ways no one could have imagined. It all began on a quiet Friday night. The building was almost empty, the hallways silent except for the hum of the elevators. Then, the first signs appeared. Lights flickered unpredictably, plunging hallways into brief, unsettling darkness. Residents reported hearing footsteps echoing above them, despite the floors being empty. Doors banged suddenly, as if slammed by an unseen hand, though there was no wind or anyone near them. Some tenants called the front desk, but security found nothing. Even the elevators seemed to hesitate, stopping between floors for no reason, as if something was moving unseen inside the shafts. One tenant, a young woman living on the 4th floor, described hearing whispers outside her door. Low, guttural voices that seemed to come from nowhere. When she opened the door to investigate, there was nothing but the empty hallway, dark and silent. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, and she felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched. By the end of the night, multiple residents had reported similar incidents. The pattern was clear. The apartment complex was no longer safe after dark, and whatever was inside was testing its boundaries, moving silently but deliberately through the hallways. One of the most disturbing accounts came from a woman living in apartment 407. Late one night, she called the building's front desk in a panic. Her voice trembled as she whispered something that would chill everyone who heard it. "It's inside my room." By the time security arrived, the room was empty. Her furniture was untouched, but the air felt thick, suffocating, and cold. She later explained that she had seen a dark figure standing in the corner of her bedroom, tall, shadowy, and featureless. Its glowing eyes fixed on her. It didn't move like a human. Instead, it glided silently, as if it belonged to the darkness itself. The tenant reported hearing it breathe, low and uneven, despite the absence of anyone else in the apartment. Every attempt to get closer caused it to vanish, leaving only a lingering sense of dread. After that night, she refused to stay in her apartment alone, sleeping instead in the well-lit common areas until she could find another place to live. Her haunting voicemail spread quickly through the complex, confirming what others had been whispering. The Shadow Man wasn't a rumor. It was real, inside the building, patient and always watching. And for those who encountered it, the fear never left. The next night, a security guard was making his usual rounds through the empty hallways. The building was silent, except for the faint hum of the lights and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something that made him freeze. A dark, shadowy figure was crawling across the ceiling above him. Its movements were unnatural, bending and twisting in ways no human could. The guard stumbled backward, heart pounding, as the figure moved silently along the length of the corridor, pausing occasionally to peer down at him with eyes that seemed to burn in the darkness. He radioed for backup, but the connection crackled and distorted, as if the presence was interfering with the signal. When others arrived moments later, the ceiling was empty. There was no sign the figure had ever been there. Yet the indentation in the ceiling tiles, barely noticeable, and the deep sense of being watched remained. That night, the Shadow Man proved it could move in ways that defied reality, bypassing doors, walls, and the laws of nature itself. For the security guard, it was a terrifying confirmation. Whatever haunted the complex was not just a shadow. It was something far more sinister, intelligent, and relentless. The following week, the building management finally reviewed the CCTV footage after receiving dozens of complaints. What they found was unsettling, so disturbing that some staff refused to watch it a second time. In the recordings, the hallways appeared normal at first, until the distortion began. The cameras flickered, glitched, and warped, as if something was interfering with the signal. Then, a dark mass slid into frame. It wasn't shaped like a person, nor any recognizable creature. It shifted and stretched, its form bending unnaturally, dissolving into the walls and reappearing moments later in a different spot. On one camera, the shadow moved without casting any reflection or depth. On another, it glided across the floor, its edges dissolving like smoke. But the most chilling part came from the footage outside apartment 407. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the shadow stopped in front of the woman's door. The recording blurred violently, as if the presence was aware it was being watched. Then, for a split second, the shadow elongated, forming what looked like a hand, before slipping under her door without opening it. When staff paused the video, that frame showed something unmistakable. Two glowing points where eyes should be, staring directly into the camera. The footage was later archived, but never released publicly. Management insisted it was a technical malfunction. The residents who saw the clip, they knew better. The Shadow Man wasn't just real, it was evolving. After the disturbing CCTV footage circulated quietly among a few residents, fear spread through the complex like wildfire. Tenants were losing sleep. Children refused to walk down the hall alone. And management, desperate to keep the situation under control, decided to bring in outside help. A local priest and a well-known medium. They arrived just after sunset. The halls were unusually cold, the lights dimmer than usual, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The priest walked from floor to floor, sprinkling holy water, whispering prayers under his breath. The medium followed behind, her eyes half closed, hands trembling as she tried to sense whatever was hiding in the shadows. At first, everything was quiet. Too quiet. They thought the cleansing might work. But then, something shifted. The moment the priest reached the 4th floor, the temperature dropped instantly, so low they could see their breath in the air. The lights along the hallway began flickering wildly, buzzing, almost screaming. Doors started rattling on both sides, slamming open and shut even though no one touched them. The medium stopped suddenly and grabbed the priest's arm. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "It's angry. You're making it stronger." A deep, echoing thud came from inside the walls, followed by another and another, like something massive was crawling between them, moving closer, reacting. As they continued, the disturbances escalated. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor. A dark mass flashed across the ceiling, knocking out several lights. The priest tried to continue the ritual, but the words shook in his throat. By the time they reached apartment 407, both of them were pale and shaking. The medium refused to go any further. She backed away slowly, saying only one sentence before leaving the building entirely. "This thing doesn't want to be removed." And from that night onward, the activity didn't calm down. It intensified. Even years later, the apartment complex remains occupied. But the Shadow Man has never disappeared. New tenants continue to report the same chilling experiences. Flickering lights, footsteps in empty hallways, doors slamming on their own, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Some hear whispers calling their names, others glimpse a tall, featureless shadow moving silently along the walls. Apartment 407 remains particularly infamous. Residents refuse to live there, citing an oppressive cold that seems to settle in the room no matter the season. Investigations by building management and private security teams have turned up nothing definitive. Cameras capture distorted shapes, yet the figure never appears fully on tape. Experts who examine the reports are left baffled, unable to explain how a presence can move with such intelligence, manipulate electronics, and evade all attempts at detection. For those who live there, the apartment is more than just a building. It is a warning. The Shadow Man is patient, intelligent, and relentless. It watches, waits, and reminds everyone who enters that some spaces are never truly safe, especially at night. And so the residents continue to live alongside the unseen, sharing stories quietly, hoping that they too won't become just another chapter in the building's dark legacy. In the flat, windswept plains of Saskatchewan sits a farmhouse that has been abandoned for decades. Locals call it cursed. For more than 40 years, anyone who tries to stay longer than a few nights is driven away. Sometimes by fear, sometimes by something far more sinister. The farmhouse appears normal at first glance. Its weathered wood siding creaks in the wind, the windows are dark, and the surrounding fields stretch endlessly into the horizon. But those who enter quickly realize this is no ordinary abandoned building. Objects move on their own. Strange noises echo through the empty rooms. Shadows flit across walls in ways that defy explanation. Stories date back decades. Farmers, travelers, and even police officers report seeing figures in the windows when no one is home. Doors slam without wind, footsteps echo in empty hallways, and whispers carry through the rooms, speaking words no one can understand. Despite attempts to clean, sell, or renovate the property, no one has ever stayed more than a week without fleeing in terror. The reports are consistent, spanning generations, and the locals all agree. The farmhouse is alive in some dark, malevolent way. Tonight, we explore one of the most documented periods of this haunting. A series of terrifying encounters that escalated to a mass haunting, leaving everyone involved questioning whether the farmhouse is merely haunted or something far worse. In the early 1980s, a family of 4 decided to take a chance and move into the infamous farmhouse. They were hopeful, believing the stories were exaggerated, or at least that they could handle a few nights of strange noises. But from the very first day, the house made it clear that it did not want them there. The father noticed the first signs while unpacking boxes. Objects shifted on their own, chairs scraped across the wooden floors, and doors opened and closed without explanation. The mother heard whispers in the empty rooms, low, unintelligible voices that seemed to speak directly to her, though no one else was around. By evening, the children were terrified. Toys would move on their own, shadows danced across the walls even with all the lights on, and a cold, oppressive air seemed to settle in every corner of the house. One child reported seeing a dark figure standing in the hallway, just out of reach, watching silently. Attempts to confront or investigate the activity only made it worse. The family described objects flying across rooms, lights flickering violently, and strange, inhuman growls echoing through the walls at night. By the third day, all 4 of them were unable to sleep, constantly on edge, and feeling as if something unseen was observing every move. Despite their determination, by the end of the week, the family fled. They left their belongings behind, never to return. Their experience became one of the most cited cases in the farmhouse's dark history, proving that the stories were not just legend. They were real, persistent, and relentless. The most disturbing activity began on their 3rd night in the farmhouse. As the family finally settled into bed, exhausted and tense, the house fell into an eerie silence. But that silence didn't last long. Just after midnight, heavy footsteps echoed from above them. Slow, deliberate, and impossibly loud. The problem was, There was no upstairs. The ceiling above their bedrooms was nothing but an empty attic with no flooring, no walkway, and certainly no place for anyone to stand. Yet the stomping continued. Step, 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 moving from one end of the house to the other, as if something enormous was pacing directly overhead. The father grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow ladder into the attic. Dust covered everything. Nothing had been touched in decades. There were no footprints, no signs of animals, nothing that could explain the thunderous noise they were hearing. But while he searched the empty space, the footsteps continued, this time coming from the hallway behind him, then the children's room, then directly above the living room where the rest of the family huddled together. It was as if multiple sets of heavy, unseen feet were walking on the ceiling all at once, surrounding them, circling, closing in. The children cried. The mother clutched them tightly, and the father stood frozen, realizing the truth. Whatever was inside the farmhouse wasn't bound by the normal rules of the world. It moved freely, effortlessly, and with purpose. From that night onward, the footsteps became a nightly ritual, a warning that the family was never alone, not even for a second. By the fifth night, the haunting escalated into something far more disturbing, something that targeted all 4 family members at once. It began with faint sounds, like soft tapping inside the walls. At first, they assumed it was rodents or settling wood. But the noises grew clearer, sharper, more human. Late at night, while the house sat in absolute darkness, the mother heard it first, a soft, muffled sobbing coming from inside the drywall near the kitchen. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was unmistakably the sound of a person crying. Moments later, whispers joined the crying. Low, raspy voices that slithered through the wooden beams, moving from room to room. The words were impossible to understand, but the tone was unmistakably sinister, cold, mocking, almost taunting. The children heard it next. Their bedroom walls vibrated with soft, rhythmic tapping, followed by a voice whispering just inches from their heads. They ran to their parents' room, trembling and crying, saying the walls were talking to them. When the father pressed his ear against the dry wall, he felt a sudden rush of icy air seep through the cracks. And beneath the cold, he heard something he would never forget. A voice whispering in a broken, breathy tone. His name. The whispers grew louder each night. Sometimes they sounded like multiple people arguing inside the walls. Other times, they were quiet sobs that rose into screams before fading into silence. No matter where the family went, the voices followed, up the stairs, into the hallways, even into the bathroom. It was as if the house itself was alive, filled with unseen entities trapped between the wooden beams, desperate to be heard or to be free. At this point, the family realized the truth. The farmhouse wasn't just haunted, it was inhabited by something deeply tormented, deeply malevolent, and determined to make its presence known. On one particularly frigid night, the family witnessed something that would forever etch fear into their memories. Through a window in the living room, they saw a figure emerge from the darkness outside. At first, it looked like a shadow, but as it stepped closer, the details became horrifyingly clear. The creature was impossibly tall and skeletal, with limbs unnaturally long, bending and twisting in ways no human could. Its eyes glowed faintly in the night, piercing through the snow-dusted landscape, staring directly at them as if it could see inside their very souls. It didn't walk like a person. It moved with a strange, fluid motion, gliding across the snow and tilting its head unnaturally, almost as if it were mocking the family. trees bent and cracked where it passed, though nothing else in the area seemed to touch them. Even from inside, the oppressive presence of the creature was suffocating. The wind seemed to carry its low, rumbling growl, shaking the windows and rattling the doors. Every instinct told them to flee, but the figure stood still for a moment, watching, patient and deliberate, before vanishing silently into the forest. That night, the family understood something terrifying. The farmhouse was not the only danger. Outside, something ancient and malevolent prowled the surrounding land, as if guarding the property. And the boundary between what was inside the house and what waited beyond the trees had begun to blur. The final night the family spent in the farmhouse was the most terrifying of all. Exhausted, fearful, and desperate to survive, they tried to keep the children close, locking doors and windows. But the house had one last horror in store. Around midnight, the children awoke to a cold, suffocating presence in their room. At the foot of their bed stood a dark figure, tall, shadowy, and impossibly still. Its glowing eyes pierced the darkness, watching them with a hunger that made their blood run cold. The parents rushed in, and the figure didn't move at first. It seemed to study them, as if weighing whether to strike. The air grew heavier, almost solid, and the temperature dropped sharply. The whispers they had been hearing for days coalesced into a chilling, unintelligible chant, echoing through the walls and ceiling. Suddenly, the figure lunged, or at least it felt like it did. The children screamed, the parents grabbed them, and the family bolted out of the room. As they ran through the hallways, doors slammed shut on their own, objects flew from shelves, and shadows stretched and twisted along the walls, following their every step. By morning, the family had fled the farmhouse permanently, leaving behind everything they owned. They never returned, and no one has lived there long enough since to challenge what inhabits the property. That final night proved one thing beyond doubt. The farmhouse does not simply harbor spirits. It commands them, traps them, and punishes anyone who dares to stay. Some places are cursed, some haunted, and some are simply too dangerous to ever return to. After that terrifying final night, the family never returned. They fled Saskatchewan with whatever belongings they could carry, leaving behind the farmhouse and a lifetime of memories they would never forget. Friends and neighbors recall the family arriving in a state of shock, pale and trembling, recounting horrors that seemed impossible, yet horrifyingly real. The farmhouse, however, remained. Attempts to sell it over the years were met with failure. Real estate agents reported feeling uneasy during visits. Potential buyers refused to enter, and rumors of strange occurrences kept the property off the market. Locals say that the house itself seems to resist being lived in, as if it actively prevents anyone from staying. Over the decades, countless reports have confirmed the same patterns. Lights turning on and off, objects moving on their own, whispers in the walls, and dark shapes glimpsed in the windows. The farmhouse has become a symbol of terror in the region, a warning that some places are not just abandoned, but inhabited by something far beyond human understanding. To this day, it stands alone on the windswept plains, silent by day, alive by night, a dark sentinel of the horrors that once consumed the family. And for anyone who hears its story, one truth is clear: some houses are never meant to be home. Nestled deep in Ontario's wilderness is a lake so picturesque it seems untouched by time. Crystal clear waters reflect the surrounding pine forests, and during the day, it attracts families, hikers, and campers looking for a peaceful retreat. But beneath this serene surface lies a history the locals rarely share with outsiders. For decades, there have been warnings. Do not stay past 9 p.m. Campers who ignore this advice report strange sounds echoing across the water, shadows moving along the tree line, and an unsettling feeling of being watched. Some even claim the lake has claimed lives, though the details are vague. Stories whispered quietly over campfires, never fully documented. Locals insist that something ancient lurks in the forest around the lake, a presence that becomes active after dark. Children playing by the shore vanish without a trace. Tents are mysteriously slashed, and visitors wake in the middle of the night to find ominous marks etched into the trees surrounding their campsite. Despite the warnings, tourists continue to arrive, drawn by the lake's beauty, unaware that darkness brings a different reality. A reality where the forest itself seems alive, and something waits patiently, watching, hungry, and ready to strike. Tonight, we follow the story of one group who ignored the warnings and experienced the terror firsthand. A night that would change their understanding of the Ontario wilderness forever. One summer evening, a group of 5 friends arrived at the lake, laughing and joking, unaware of the warnings that had haunted the area for decades. They set up their tents, unpacked their gear, and admired the calm beauty of the water as the sun dipped below the horizon. As darkness fell, the forest around them grew silent. The usual sounds of birds and insects faded, replaced by an unnatural stillness. Shadows stretched longer than they should, and the trees seemed to sway without wind. Despite the unease creeping in, the friends brushed it off, telling themselves it was just their imagination. They decided to stay past 9 p.m., ignoring the repeated warnings of locals. One of them suggested a late-night hike along the lake shore, a seemingly harmless idea, until the first strange noises began. Twigs snapped far too close to their feet, though no one was there. A distant howl echoed through the trees, unnaturally low, almost human. Almost something else. By the time they returned to their campsite, the temperature had dropped sharply. Their flashlights flickered, and in the reflection of the lake, one friend swore they saw a tall, dark figure standing at the tree line, motionless, watching. The night had just begun, and the beauty of the lake had already turned into something far more sinister. Whatever lurked in the shadows was awake, and it had noticed them. Not long after the friends returned to their campsite, the first screams shattered the stillness of the night. At first, they thought it was an animal, a wolf or a coyote. But the sound was too chilling, too raw, too human. The scream echoed across the lake, bouncing off the trees as if the forest itself were amplifying the terror. It was high-pitched, ragged, and filled with pain, yet also unnatural in tone, like something caught between a human cry and a demonic roar. One friend shined a flashlight toward the tree line and saw movement, fast, jerky, impossible to track. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist in impossible ways, and the screams came again, closer this time, circling around the campsite. They tried calling out, thinking someone was in danger, but the sound did not respond logically. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It was something else. Something intelligent, patient, and hunting. The group huddled together, fear pressing down like a physical weight. Every instinct screamed at them to run, but every path they might take seemed blocked by darkness or the endless forest. That night, they realized the lake's beauty hid a predator far older and far more malevolent than anything they could have imagined. Whatever made that scream, it was waiting, watching, and ready to strike. As the screaming faded into the eerie silence of the forest, one of the friends finally mustered the courage to look toward the tree line. What they saw made their blood run cold. Standing motionless between two towering pines was a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. Its body was pitch black, blending perfectly with the shadows, but the outline was unmistakable. Tall, skeletal, and impossibly thin. Two long, twisted horns jutted from its head, curving like branches stripped bare by winter. Its eyes glowed faintly, burning with an unnatural light that seemed to pierce through the darkness and right into their souls. The creature did not move. It simply watched, patiently, every subtle motion of the campers. Even the wind seemed to bend around it, carrying only the faintest whisper of its presence. Time seemed to stretch. Every second felt endless as the group froze, unable to look away, yet terrified of breaking the gaze of this silent predator. The creature's stillness was the most terrifying part, knowing it could move in a heartbeat, but choosing not to, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Eventually, it retreated into the shadows, vanishing as if it had never been there. But the memory remained, etched into the friends' minds forever. The black-horned creature was real, and it had chosen to reveal itself that night, an unspoken warning that the lake's darkness was far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. As the night wore on, the terror escalated. Around midnight, one of the friends, Alex, began acting strangely. At first, it was subtle. He moved slower, his gaze unfocused, and he muttered to himself in a voice too low to understand. Then, the changes became undeniable. His voice deepened unnaturally, guttural and harsh, echoing in the empty campsite. His eyes, once bright and familiar, darkened into an abyssal black, reflecting nothing of the world around him. The others tried to reason with him, to pull him away from the edge of the firelight. But Alex turned toward them with a chilling, inhuman intensity. His movements were jerky, unnatural, almost as if his body was no longer fully his own. A low growl escaped his throat, followed by whispers in a language none of them recognized. The wind seemed to carry the sound, making it impossible to tell where the voice was coming from. Alex, the trees, or the darkness itself. Panic set in. One friend grabbed a flashlight and swung it directly at him, only for the light to bend strangely, illuminating nothing, as if the darkness itself was swallowing it. Alex stumbled back into the tree line, moving with speed and precision no human could achieve, yet still under some controlling presence. By the time he emerged again, he was eerily calm, smiling faintly, eyes still black. The friends realized the truth. Whatever stalked the lake didn't just watch. It could invade, corrupt, and take hold, turning one of them into a vessel for the lake's dark, ancient power. From that night on, the campfire's warmth could not chase away the fear. They knew the forest held more than shadows. It held a predator capable of reaching into their very souls. Terrified and desperate, the remaining friends had no choice but to flee. Grabbing only what they could carry, they ran through the dense forest, hearts pounding, lungs burning, and branches slashing at their faces. Every step seemed to echo unnaturally, as if the forest itself was alive, guiding them deeper into the darkness. Behind them, they could hear it moving, fast, silent, relentless. Whatever had possessed Alex was now chasing them, or perhaps the creature itself had taken notice. Twigs snapped, leaves rustled, and the low, guttural growls followed their every move, bouncing through the trees and making it impossible to tell exactly where it was. The path was confusing, the darkness absolute. Every clearing seemed to vanish the moment they reached it. One friend stumbled and fell, scrambling to get back up as something unseen rushed past him, so close he could feel the icy brush of its presence. Shouting and panic filled the air. They ran blindly, guided only by the faint glow of the moon above the lake. Behind them, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, as if mocking their efforts, moving faster than any human could. Finally, after what felt like hours, the forest opened onto a dirt road, and they ran straight into a ranger's vehicle, collapsing in terror. They were alive, but the haunting had not ended. The darkness had followed them to the edge of the forest, and the memory of the lake and the black-horned creature would never leave. That night taught them one brutal truth. Beauty can hide evil, and sometimes curiosity is a ticket straight into nightmare. After their harrowing escape, the friends were taken to a nearby hospital, trembling and exhausted. Doctors were baffled. Several displayed symptoms that defied medical explanation. Alex, in particular, remained deeply disturbed. His eyes still carried that unnatural darkness, and his voice occasionally slipped into the deep, guttural tones heard in the forest. Police were called to investigate. They interviewed the group, noting inconsistencies in timelines and the sheer terror etched on their faces. Officers later reviewed hospital records and found something even more unsettling. Elevated stress hormones, irregular heart rhythms, and unexplainable behavioral shifts in Alex, all beyond normal human limits. Local authorities attempted to inspect the campsite the following day. The tents were slashed, gear strewn about, and odd, claw-like marks were embedded in the tree trunks surrounding the lake. No animal could have made the marks. The area radiated a sense of dread so palpable that even the most experienced officers felt uneasy. Despite documenting the evidence, police could offer no rational explanation. The case was filed as unexplained and quickly buried, though rumors continued to circulate among locals. Hikers and campers were warned to respect the lake's darkness, for whatever lurked there was patient, intelligent, and capable of influencing anyone who dared to stay past nightfall. For the friends, the police report offered little comfort. They had survived, but the Ontario campground demon had left its mark, a reminder that the forest's shadows are never empty, and some nights should never be spent under the stars. Stretching across British Columbia and into Alberta, Highway 16 is a long, isolated route that cuts through dense forests, small towns, and stretches of wilderness. By day, it appears peaceful, just another Canadian road. But at night, it becomes a corridor of fear, known across the country as the Highway of Tears. For decades, this highway has been linked to one of Canada's most heartbreaking and tragic mysteries: the disappearance of dozens of Indigenous women and girls. Their stories remain incomplete, their fates often unknown, and for families left behind, the pain is ongoing and immeasurable. Drivers passing through remote sections of the highway report eerie feelings of being watched, sudden fogs rolling in without warning, and lights in the distance that vanish when approached. Many victims were last seen hitchhiking, walking alone, or trying to reach a nearby town. Simple actions that somehow led to tragedy. The highway has earned a chilling reputation. Locals warn travelers to avoid stopping for strangers, to never hitchhike alone, and to stay alert even during daylight hours. Yet despite warnings, the disappearances continued, patterned, unexplained, and hauntingly consistent. This story is not just about fear. It's about mystery, tragedy, and the unanswered questions that continue to haunt Highway 16. Tonight, we follow some of the documented cases and first-hand accounts, exploring the dark truth behind this infamous stretch of road. As investigations into Highway 16 continued, a disturbing pattern emerged. Women and girls would vanish without a trace, their disappearances occurring under eerily similar circumstances. Most were young, often traveling alone, and last seen hitchhiking or walking along isolated stretches of the highway. Some vanished in the early evening, others in broad daylight. In almost every case, no physical evidence was left behind, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing that could indicate what had happened. Families were left with only unanswered questions, and the communities along the highway grew increasingly fearful. The disappearances spanned decades. From the 1970s to today, new cases would occasionally surface, each echoing the same chilling details. Last seen on the roadside, never reaching their intended destination, and the highway remaining silent as if it had swallowed them whole. Locals whispered that certain stretches of the road were cursed, haunted by the pain of the missing. Travelers reported seeing fleeting figures on the roadside, shadows of women appearing and disappearing in the fog, sometimes waving for help, only to vanish when approached. The repeated pattern is what makes Highway 16 so terrifying. It is not just a road. It is a place where countless lives have been taken or lost. A stretch of land that continues to demand attention, justice, and remembrance for the women who vanished without a trace. Over the years, multiple eyewitness accounts have added a chilling layer to the mystery of Highway 16. Survivors and locals alike describe encounters with unsettling figures, men, vehicles, and shadows that seem linked to the disappearances. Some recall a man in a truck, often driving slowly along the highway at night, offering rides to hitchhikers before they vanish. Others speak of a white van seen repeatedly along remote stretches, always appearing suddenly and then disappearing just as quickly, leaving no trace of its presence. Then there are the shadowy figures. Tall, indistinct shapes seen standing at the roadside, sometimes motionless, sometimes moving with unnatural speed. Drivers passing these figures often report a sudden sense of dread, a feeling that something is intensely watching, even after the figure vanishes into the darkness. Witnesses report hearing footsteps on the gravel shoulder, voices calling out in the fog, and glimpses of figures inside vehicles where no one should be. The accounts are consistent. The presence is calculated, patient, and always near the areas where women disappeared. These first-hand reports suggest more than random accidents. They hint at a sinister intelligence lurking along Highway 16, a force that has preyed on vulnerable travelers for decades. And for anyone driving alone at night, the knowledge that these sightings are real makes the journey through the highway's foggy stretches far more terrifying. Among the countless stories along Highway 16, one account stands out. A woman who survived an encounter that could have ended her life. Her story is chilling, a glimpse into the terror that has haunted this road for decades. She was hitchhiking late one evening, trying to reach a nearby town before nightfall. A white van pulled up, and the driver offered a ride. Against her better judgment, she accepted. Almost immediately, she sensed something was wrong. The air inside the van was cold, and the driver's behavior was unnatural, almost predatory. Suddenly, he reached toward her, and she realized she was trapped. Her instincts screamed to run, but the doors were locked. Panic surged through her, and she grabbed a heavy object from the seat, swinging wildly. In a moment of desperation, she forced the door open and jumped onto the side of the road. She ran through the darkness, branches whipping her face, heart hammering in her chest. Behind her, she swore she could hear the van engine starting again, the tires crunching on gravel. But when she looked back, there was no vehicle, only the mist rolling across the highway. Her description of the driver was horrifying. A tall man, face obscured by shadows, with cold, empty eyes that seemed to pierce into her soul. She claims his presence wasn't just human. There was something unnatural about him, a sense of darkness that she could feel radiating from every movement. Her escape was a miracle, but the memory of that night still haunts her. She warns anyone traveling Highway 16 to be cautious, to never hitchhike, and to remember that the shadows along the road may hide horrors far beyond imagination. Over the decades, police investigations into Highway 16 have produced thousands of files, yet many questions remain unanswered. Officers and detectives documented disappearances, suspicious vehicles, and numerous witness accounts. But in most cases, no solid evidence ever surfaced. Some investigators believe the highway has been used by serial killers, preying on vulnerable travelers who hitchhiked or walked alone at night. Others point to human trafficking networks, noting patterns that suggest some women may have been kidnapped and transported elsewhere. Adding to the mystery are accounts of paranormal activity. Witnesses describe shadowy figures standing on the roadside, lights appearing and disappearing in the fog, and a strange, oppressive feeling that seems to hang over certain stretches of the highway. Some locals even claim that spirits of the missing women linger, appearing as fleeting silhouettes or guiding lights in the night, as if pleading to be remembered. The combination of documented criminal activity and unexplained phenomena has created a dark, almost mythic aura around Highway 16. For decades, authorities have struggled to separate fact from fear, yet the disappearances continue. The highway is a reminder of human cruelty, yes, but also of something far older and more mysterious, a darkness that seems to grow with every missing person. For travelers, the message is clear. This road demands caution, respect, and awareness, because the unknown is as real as the tragedy that has unfolded along its stretches. One of the most unsettling patterns along Highway 16 is the eerie consistency of the victims' experiences. Survivors and witnesses often report the same chilling detail: a voice whispering their name just before they vanished. Many describe it as soft, almost gentle at first, calling out from the shadows along the roadside or from the fog rolling over the asphalt. But that softness quickly turns sinister, filling the air with a sense of dread and making the victim feel both drawn to it and terrified. The whispering is not random. It is precise, targeted, and personal, almost as if the voice knows them intimately and is deliberately luring them closer to danger. Survivors recount the paralyzing fear that comes with hearing their own name in a voice that is unmistakably human, yet somehow wrong, alien, or inhuman. Even those who managed to escape reported being haunted by it for years afterward, hearing the whispers in dreams or when passing isolated roads. The consistency across decades of cases suggests something more than coincidence. A presence, human or otherwise, that has been haunting the highway for generations. This unnerving detail leaves one chilling conclusion. Along Highway 16, the danger is not just physical. Something intelligent, patient, and malevolent has been calling out to those who travel its darkened paths, waiting for the right moment to strike. Decades have passed, yet Highway 16 continues to inspire fear and caution. The disappearances never truly stopped, and each new case adds to the highway's dark legacy. Families of the missing still search tirelessly, holding on to hope but haunted by uncertainty. Locals remain wary, warning travelers to avoid the isolated stretches, especially after dark. Witnesses continue to report strange shadows along the roadside, unidentifiable vehicles appearing suddenly, and whispers that seem to follow them through the fog. Even those simply passing through feel an oppressive presence, as if the highway itself remembers every tragedy and watches every traveler. The highway has become more than a road. It is a symbol of pain, loss, and unresolved terror. Generations have grown up hearing the stories of the missing women, and the fear has become woven into the very culture of the region. For anyone driving its remote stretches, the message is clear. Highway 16 is not just a passage from one town to another. It is a place where darkness lingers, where the past is never buried, and where danger can strike in the silence of the night. The road may appear ordinary by day, but after dark, it is anything but safe. Deep in the heart of Manitoba stands a prison with a reputation that chills even the toughest guards. Officially, it is just another correctional facility. But for decades, whispers of a curse have surrounded its walls. Many staff members refuse to work night shifts, and several guards have quit altogether, unable to handle the strange occurrences that defy explanation. Even inmates speak of the place in hushed tones. Certain cells are avoided entirely, with prisoners claiming that they are cursed or watched. Stories of cold spots, disembodied voices, and unexplained shadows circulating the corridors are common, yet largely dismissed by the administration as exaggerations. Those who have spent time in the prison's older wings tell of an oppressive feeling that settles over the block after lights out, a sensation that something unseen is observing every move. Footsteps echo down empty hallways, doors slam without reason, and the air feels heavy, almost alive. Some guards recount objects moving on their own, keys disappearing and reappearing in impossible locations, and unexplained whispers just beyond the reach of hearing. Even routine inspections have occasionally ended in chaos, with officers swearing that unseen forces interfered with their work. This prison is more than just a place of confinement. It carries a dark history, a lingering curse that has grown stronger with every year, leaving both staff and inmates wary of the night and fearful of the unseen forces that lurk within its walls. Among the prison's numerous paranormal reports, one stands out above the rest: sightings of a tall black figure in cell block C. Former inmates describe it as a presence that moves silently along the corridors, always just out of reach, yet undeniably watching. Some prisoners claim they first noticed it in the shadows, standing at the end of the hallway, completely still. Its features were impossible to make out, just a dark, towering silhouette. But the sense of menace was unmistakable. Those who encountered it reported sudden chills, a racing heartbeat, and an overwhelming feeling of being hunted. Interestingly, several former prisoners, after their release, produced drawings of the figure, and despite never communicating with one another, the sketches were eerily consistent. Each depicted the same tall, shadowy form, faceless, looming, and seemingly larger than life. Some even drew its hands, long, skeletal, and disproportionate, stretching unnaturally as if capable of reaching through walls. Staff members in cell block C confirmed the fear. Guards who had been assigned to patrol the area alone at night reported doors slamming, unexplained noises, and a sense that someone or something was following them. Even cameras sometimes recorded strange, fleeting shadows that seemed impossible to place. The black figure is more than a rumor. It is a persistent presence, an unshakable darkness that has left an indelible mark on anyone who has stepped foot in cell block C. For those inside, the lesson is clear. Some corners of the prison are best left unvisited, and some shadows are not meant to be confronted. The solitary confinement wing of the Manitoba prison is known to break even the strongest inmates. But not just because of the isolation. For years, prisoners placed in those cells have reported hearing whispers in the dark. Not echoes, not hallucinations, but voices that seem to come from inside the walls themselves. Some inmates describe the whispers as soft at first, almost like someone breathing right next to their ear. But as the nights dragged on, the voices grew clearer, whispering their names, repeating disturbing phrases, and urging them toward violent thoughts. Many inmates insisted the voices told them to hurt themselves, or worse. Guards initially believed the claims were signs of stress or mental strain. But everything changed when officers themselves began reporting similar experiences. Some heard faint murmurs while conducting night rounds, only to find every cell empty. Others described feeling a sudden, chilling breath on the back of their necks while locking up, even though no one else was in the hallway. Former inmates say the solitary wing feels alive, as if something within it feeds on fear and isolation. A few refused to stay in their cells, banging on their doors in panic, begging guards to move them anywhere else. Several attempted self-harm during their stay, each describing the same thing afterward. A voice that would not stop speaking to them in the dark. To this day, the prison avoids sending inmates to the deeper solitary cells unless absolutely necessary. Too many incidents, too many whispers, too many nights when the unseen presence pushed human minds past their breaking point. One night, what began as routine lockdown turned into chaos. Inmates in the older wings reported seeing a shadow moving through the iron bars of their cells, an impossible sight, yet witnessed by dozens at the same time. The figure was tall, dark, and featureless, gliding silently through the bars as though they were not there at all. Panic spread instantly. Inmates began screaming, banging on doors, and demanding to be moved. Some tried to flee to other sections of the prison, only to be stopped by guards, who were themselves unnerved by the reports. The sense of an unseen presence invading what was supposed to be the most secure part of the facility ignited terror on every level. The situation escalated rapidly into a full-blown riot. Prisoners overturned furniture, smashed lights, and shouted in fear and confusion. Guards struggled to regain control, many reporting a cold, oppressive atmosphere that seemed to weigh down every action. The shadow reportedly appeared in multiple locations throughout the wing, always just ahead of the inmate's line of sight, as if guiding the panic. By the time order was restored, several inmates and guards were injured, and the solitary wing remained off-limits for weeks. Investigators could find no logical explanation, no intruders, no flaws in security, no evidence of hallucinations among the staff. The riot was a stark reminder. Within the walls of the Manitoba prison, the shadows are not just imagined. They are a force that can manipulate fear, provoke chaos, and push people to the edge of their sanity. An ever-present threat lurking behind iron bars. One night, a veteran guard volunteered for a late shift in the prison's oldest wing, a decision he would later describe as the worst of his life. For hours, everything seemed normal. Empty corridors, locked cells, the hum of fluorescent lights. But just past midnight, he noticed something unsettling. At the end of a dimly lit hallway, a tall figure emerged from the shadows. At first, he thought it was an inmate out of place, but as it moved closer, he realized nothing about it was human. Its limbs were unnaturally long, joints bending in ways no human body could, and its presence radiated a suffocating darkness. The guard froze, heart pounding, as the figure glided silently toward him. It made no sound, no breathing, nothing that would identify it as alive in the traditional sense. And yet, it exuded intelligence, an awareness that it was being watched, as if studying him, testing him. He stumbled backward, trying to radio for backup, only to find his radio dead. The lights flickered, plunging the hallway into near darkness. When he finally blinked, the figure was gone. But the fear, the sense of being hunted, remained imprinted on his mind. By morning, the guard resigned without explanation. In his official report, he wrote one sentence: "It wasn't human." He never returned, warning others that some forces inside the prison were beyond comprehension. and that the shadows were patient, always watching, and capable of turning fear into reality. After years of strange occurrences, paranormal investigators were finally allowed to enter the Manitoba prison. Equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and motion sensors, they sought to document the unexplained events that had terrified inmates and guards alike. Almost immediately, the investigators encountered problems. Cameras failed to record certain areas, batteries drained within minutes, and motion sensors went off without any visible movement. The air felt thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe, and a constant chill seemed to seep into every room. During an audio sweep of the solitary wing, faint whispers were captured, indistinct at first, then gradually forming words. Voices calling out names, pleading, and sometimes shouting commands. One recording clearly captured a scream, high-pitched and filled with terror, echoing down a hallway where no one was present. Investigators also reported seeing shadows dart across corridors, moving against the direction of light, and fleeting glimpses of a tall, black figure in cell blocks, vanishing before they could approach. Equipment would malfunction the moment the shadows appeared, making documentation frustrating and unnerving. By the end of their investigation, the team was shaken. Their conclusion was clear. The prison was home to an intelligent, malevolent presence, one that actively resisted observation and seemed capable of interacting with both people and technology. The Manitoba prison's haunted reputation was confirmed, and the investigators left with a single warning. Some places are cursed for a reason, and some shadows are never meant to be chased. Despite decades of terrifying reports, unexplained deaths, and paranormal investigations confirming the prison's dark reputation, the Manitoba facility remains fully operational. Guards continue to work its corridors, and inmates still fill its cells, some unknowingly entering areas shrouded in shadow and fear. New staff members are warned of the strange occurrences, yet many dismiss them as superstition until they experience the inexplicable themselves. Lights flicker, whispers echo, and shadows move in ways that defy reason. Some guards request transfers, while others quietly endure, haunted by nights they will never forget. Inmates continue to avoid certain cells and wings, recounting stories of figures that watch, voices that speak in the dark, and a presence that feeds on fear and isolation. Despite security protocols and surveillance cameras, strange phenomena persist, seemingly immune to logic or explanation. The prison's reputation endures as a cautionary tale. Even within walls designed to confine human criminals, some darkness cannot be contained. The Manitoba prison stands as a place where history, tragedy, and the supernatural collide, reminding everyone that some spaces are never truly safe, and some shadows never leave. As we come to the close of these 7 truly disturbing Canadian horror stories, take a moment to reflect on what binds them all together. Isolation. Every story unfolds in vast, empty spaces. Lonely highways, remote forests, abandoned buildings, places where help is far away, and fear can grow unchecked. Unknown entities. From shadow figures and black-horned creatures to whispers in the dark. These are not mere legends. They are encounters with forces that defy explanation, leaving real people facing terror they cannot understand. Canada's dark wilderness. Beneath the country's breathtaking beauty, its forests, lakes, and snowy expanses, lurks a hidden darkness. A wilderness that can conceal horrors both human and supernatural. Unsolved mysteries. Decades pass, and the questions remain. Missing women, haunted roads, cursed prisons, and creatures lurking in the night continue to defy logic and evade resolution. Real people facing impossible horrors. What makes these stories truly chilling is that they happen to real men and women, whose lives were forever changed by encounters with the unknown. So, The next time you find yourself alone in the Canadian wilderness, remember this: some things hide in the snow, and they are always watching. If you have ever experienced something strange, terrifying, or inexplicable in Canada, or anywhere, share your story in the comments below. And if you want more real, disturbing tales that will leave you questioning the safety of the world around you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. There are many more shadows waiting to be revealed, and you won't want to miss them.